My name is Alexis. I am 33 years old, and I was supposed to be tasting my wedding cake today. Instead, I found myself standing in Terminal 4 of JFK Airport, holding two half-empty cups of coffee and my fiancé's heavy winter coat. He had just casually announced that he was taking a break from our relationship to tour Europe with his college fraternity brothers. He told me he needed to find his youth before tying the knot. What he did not tell me was that he planned to fund his midlife crisis using our entire joint wedding savings. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever had to burn your own life down just to build a better one. The fluorescent lights of the international terminal buzzed aggressively overhead. I stood perfectly still, trying to process the words that had just left Bradley's mouth. We had been engaged for a year, and our wedding was exactly 3 weeks away. I had spent the entire morning finalizing the seating chart and confirming the floral arrangements with our vendors. We were supposed to be driving to Manhattan for our final tasting with a premier pastry chef. Instead, he had directed me to the airport under the guise of picking up a last-minute corporate client for my luxury travel concierge firm. It was a complete lie. Bradley was 35 years old, but standing there in his crisp designer streetwear, he looked like a college sophomore eager for spring break. He adjusted his expensive sunglasses, the exact pair I had bought him for his previous birthday, and offered me a careless shrug. "I just need some space, Alexis," he said, shifting his leather duffel bag on his shoulder. "You have become so boring and domestic lately. All you do is obsess over your travel concierge business and talk about wedding caterers. I feel like I am suffocating in this routine. I need to get away and find my youth before I am completely caged by marriage." I stared at him, hoping this was some kind of elaborate, mean-spirited joke. I had spent the last 5 years of my life pouring every ounce of my energy into building my company from the ground up. My firm specialized in high-stakes corporate event planning and luxury travel management for executives. I worked 80-hour weeks negotiating with high-end venues and coordinating international logistics. My relentless focus was the only reason we lived in a stunning downtown apartment. It was the only reason Bradley could afford to coast along as a mid-level marketing manager at a firm he complained about daily, but never had the ambition to leave. I had quietly funded our luxury lifestyle, letting him maintain the illusion of being the provider, while I handled the actual financial heavy lifting. "You are leaving for Europe," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "3 weeks before our wedding. What about the cake tasting? What about the final venue walkthrough on Monday morning?" Bradley sighed heavily, as if my questions were an unreasonable burden placed on his shoulders. "Just handle it, Alexis. You are the professional event planner, right? That is your whole identity now. So just do your job and push everything back a few months. I am going to Barcelona with the guys. I need this break to figure out if being married to you is actually what I want for my life." He took off his heavy winter coat and shoved it into my free hand, spilling a few hot drops of coffee onto my wrist. "Here, take this back to the apartment for me. I will not need it in Spain." Before I could formulate a response to the sheer audacity of his request, a loud, obnoxious voice echoed across the busy terminal. "Yo, Brad, let us go, man. The luxury lounge is calling our names." I turned to see Chad walking toward us. Chad was Bradley's best friend from his college fraternity days, a man who peaked at age 21 and absolutely refused to let it go. He was dragging a massive suitcase and grinning widely. Chad had never liked me, mostly because I refused to finance his failed startup ideas, but he loved the perks of being Bradley's friend, when I was the one paying for the expensive dinners and drinks. "Chad," I said, my voice tight with disbelief, "you are a part of this." Chad laughed, slapping Bradley hard on the back. "Of course I am. We are taking our boy on a proper farewell tour before he signs his life away. Do not worry about a thing, Alexis. Just keep the bridal suite warm for us until we get back." Bradley did not correct him. He did not defend me or ask for respect. He simply smiled, that charming, effortless smile that had made me fall in love with him 4 years ago. "I will call you when I land in Barcelona," Bradley said, offering a half-hearted wave. "Just try to relax while I'm gone. Find a hobby outside of work." I stood frozen, watching the man I was supposed to marry walk away from me. He bypassed the regular security line and moved straight toward the expedited screening lane, a premium travel perk he only possessed because I had manually linked his name to my elite corporate travel account. He did not look back, not a single time. He was laughing at something Chad said, completely untroubled by the fact that he had just detonated our future in the middle of a crowded airport. The walk back to the parking garage felt like moving underwater. Every step was heavy, weighed down by the thick winter coat draped over my arm and the crushing realization of what had just happened. I had sacrificed my 20s to build a secure foundation for us. I had missed social events, skipped vacations, and poured my earnings into a joint wedding fund to give us the perfect start to our marriage, and he had just called me boring and domestic as a reward for my loyalty. I reached my car, a practical but elegant sedan that contrasted sharply with the flashy vehicles my clients drove. I opened the door and threw his winter coat onto the passenger seat with unnecessary force. The leather seats were cold, but the chill inside my chest was far worse. I gripped the steering wheel, feeling my knuckles turning white as I tried to control the shaking in my hands. I expected to cry. I expected to feel the overwhelming urge to call him and beg him to come back to me. Instead, a strange clinical numbness washed over me. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life in the echoey concrete garage. As I reached to shift the car into drive, my phone lit up brightly in the center console cup holder. It was a push notification from my banking application. When the notification chimed, I assumed it was a calendar reminder for the bakery appointment we were currently missing. I glanced down. It was an automated high-balance alert from our joint banking institution. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. I logged into the secure financial portal. We had opened this specific joint account 2 years ago. We called it our Forever Fund. I had deposited my entire first quarter business bonus into it. I had routed 20% of my monthly corporate income into it. Bradley contributed when he could, but his mediocre salary barely covered his expensive golf habits and custom sneaker collection. The balance had been a point of massive pride for me. It represented our hard work and our future. Now, looking at the glowing screen, I watched the numbers change in real time. $15,000 gone in a single swipe. The merchant name read, Ibiza Luxury Villas and VIP Services. It was not an accidental charge or a fraudulent hack by a stranger. It was a targeted, deliberate extraction of our funds. My heart stopped beating for a full second. I refreshed the application, hoping desperately it was a system error or a glitch. The numbers remained exactly the same. Bradley had not just walked away from our wedding planning to take a temporary break. He had deliberately waited until he was past airport security to swipe our joint wedding debit card for an international luxury estate. He was funding his fraternity boy midlife crisis using the exact money I had saved to pay our wedding caterers and the florist. I sat in the dim parking garage, gripping my phone as the shock evaporated and a profound, sharp anger took its place. He thought I was boring. He thought I was just going to sit at home organizing seating charts and waiting patiently for him to finish his European joyride. He thought he could steal from me, and I would simply accept it, because I was too domestic to fight back. He had vastly underestimated the woman he was dealing with. I did not cry. I did not scream. I put the car in drive and pulled out of the parking garage, paying the $40 parking fee with my personal credit card. As I merged onto the highway heading back to the luxury apartment that I exclusively paid the lease for, a new plan began to formulate in my mind. Bradley wanted a break from our relationship. I was going to give him a break that would permanently alter the course of his entire life. I pulled out of the airport parking structure and merged onto the highway. The heater in my car was blasting, but I was shivering uncontrollably. I could not stop looking at the notification on my phone screen. $15,000. I took the first exit I could find and pulled into the empty parking lot of a retail strip mall. I put the car in park and picked up my phone. My hands were finally steady. The initial shock had burned away, leaving behind a cold and razor-sharp clarity. I opened the banking application again. I watched the screen. A new notification popped up. Another charge appeared. $2,000 at a luxury beach club in Ibiza. Another notification arrived seconds later. $800 at a high-end steakhouse. Then another. $5,000 for a private yacht charter deposit. It was happening in real time. He was standing on another continent swiping the card we had specifically designated for our future together. I stared at the numbers and thought about where that money came from. 85% of that account was my money. It was the money I earned by missing weekends with my friends. It was the money I made by staying up until 3 in the morning, fixing corporate travel itineraries for demanding tech executives. I had built a highly successful luxury travel and corporate event firm. I managed millions of dollars for my clients. I knew how to budget and I knew how to save. Bradley had contributed a fraction of the money in that account. He always claimed his mid-level marketing salary was tied up in bad stock investments and old student loans. I had believed him. I had trusted him when he said we were building a life together. Now he was drinking vintage champagne on a yacht using the funds I had earmarked for our floral arrangements and catering deposit. I tapped his contact name and hit call. The line rang once before going straight to voicemail. I called again. The automated voice recording filled the silent car. He was declining my calls. He was sitting in a VIP section of a Spanish nightclub, deliberately pressing the ignore button while spending my hard-earned money. I opened my messaging application and typed out a message demanding he answer the phone immediately. I watched the 3 little dots appear on the screen indicating he was typing. I waited for an apology. I waited for an explanation. I even waited for a lie. His response popped up on the screen. "Stop suffocating me, Alexis. I told you I need space. You are acting crazy right now, and this is exactly why I need this break. I need to make sure I actually want to marry you before I sign my life away. Stop checking the bank account and just let me breathe." Suffocating him, acting crazy. I read the words over and over again. He was actively stealing thousands of dollars from me, and he had the audacity to call me crazy for noticing. He was framing his theft and his abandonment as my fault. He was trying to make me feel guilty for questioning why he was draining our wedding fund. It was textbook manipulation. For years I had minimized my own needs to accommodate his fragile ego. I had made myself smaller so he could feel bigger. I realized in that moment that he did not just want a vacation. He wanted to punish me for being the successful one. He wanted to humiliate me. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat next to his discarded winter coat. I did not text him back. There was no point in arguing with a man who was committed to misunderstanding me. I put the car back in drive and pulled out of the parking lot. I did not go to our apartment. I drove directly to the main branch of our bank in downtown Manhattan. I navigated the busy streets with a singular focus. The wedding was obviously off, but I needed to secure whatever was left of my money. I had to protect my assets before he could do any more damage to my financial stability. The traffic in the city was heavy, but I moved with aggressive precision. I parked my sedan in a nearby garage and walked briskly toward the bank building. The weather was freezing, but I did not feel the cold. I only felt the burning determination to stop him from taking another dime from me. The bank was quiet and heavily air-conditioned. The marble floors echoed as I walked straight to the customer service desk. I did not wait in the regular teller line. I asked the receptionist to speak with a personal banker, immediately explaining that I had an urgent fraud situation. A young man wearing a crisp blue suit led me to his cubicle. His name tag read Thomas. He offered me a bottle of water and asked how he could help me today. I sat down and placed my identification on his desk. "I need to freeze my joint checking account," I told him. "My fiancé is currently making unauthorized international charges in Europe, and I need to stop all outgoing transactions immediately. Please freeze the debit cards and halt any pending transfers." Thomas nodded sympathetically and typed my information into his computer. He asked me to verify my social security number and my current address. I recited the information perfectly without hesitation. Thomas clicked his mouse a few times and then stopped. He leaned closer to the monitor. His eyebrows pulled together in a frown. He clicked again. The sympathetic and professional smile vanished from his face completely. It was replaced by a look of deep professional discomfort and genuine pity. "Miss Alexis," he said, his voice dropping to a low and careful whisper. I cannot freeze the funds in this account. What do you mean you cannot freeze it? I asked, leaning forward in my chair. I am the primary account holder. I opened that account. I am telling you to freeze the account right now before he spends another $1,000 on a yacht. I can freeze the physical debit cards, Thomas explained gently. But there are no funds left to secure. I stared at him. My brain struggled to process his words. That is impossible, I said. Even with the exorbitant charges he just made in Ibiza, there should be at least $40,000 left in liquid cash. We deposited my corporate bonus last week, specifically to pay the final venue installment and the catering company. The money has to be there. Thomas turned his monitor slightly so I could see the screen. I am so sorry, he said. 20 minutes ago, your fiancé initiated an international wire transfer. He moved the remaining $40,000 into a private offshore account solely under his name. Because the international charges from the luxury villas in Spain are still pending and the wire transfer cleared instantly, your joint account is not just empty. It is currently overdrawn by nearly $3,000. I looked at the red numbers on the screen. Negative $3,000. He had taken everything. He had timed the wire transfer perfectly. He knew exactly how long it would take for the pending charges to hit the account. He knew I would be driving home from the airport and unable to stop him. He had planned this entire escape down to the very last minute. He did not just take a spontaneous break from our relationship. This was a calculated and premeditated financial assault. He wanted to leave me with nothing but canceled wedding contracts and overdraft fees. He wanted to break me financially so I would have no choice but to beg him to come back. Thomas looked at me with deep concern. We can file a dispute for the overdraft fees, he offered quietly. But since his name is on the joint account, the wire transfer itself is considered legally authorized. I cannot reverse the transfer without his explicit consent. You will be responsible for the negative balance if the pending charges clear. I took a deep breath. The sterile air of the bank filled my lungs. I nodded slowly. Do not file a dispute, I told Thomas. Just freeze the card so he cannot accrue any more debt on this specific account. I will cover the negative balance tomorrow morning from my personal business account. Thomas looked surprised by my calm reaction. He clearly expected me to break down in tears or start screaming, but I was far past the point of crying. I thanked Thomas for his help and gathered my identification. I walked out of the bank and stepped back into the freezing New York air. Bradley thought he had outsmarted me. He thought taking $40,000 would ruin my life. But he forgot one very important detail. He forgot who built our lifestyle in the first place. He forgot that I ran a highly lucrative corporate travel agency. He forgot that I held the keys to everything else. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for Bradley's mother. It was time to see just how deep this betrayal really went. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Beverly. I pressed the call button and listened to the steady ringing sound. I prepared myself for the conversation ahead, knowing my entire future depended on my next move. The battle had officially begun, and I was ready to win. I sat in my car staring at the email from our premier wedding venue. $50,000 was due in exactly 48 hours, or our date was forfeited entirely. My mother-in-law Beverly had just ambushed me at lunch, demanding I pay the balance myself, so her son would not be stressed when he returned from finding his youth. Her public Facebook post was already gathering likes from her country club friends praising Bradley for exploring the world and refusing to be caged. I placed my phone on the passenger seat. I did not cry. I did not scream. I put the car in gear and drove away from the restaurant. I was not going to waste another moment mourning a man who used me as a bank or a family that viewed me as a convenient doormat. I drove straight to my office in the financial district. The city traffic moved sluggishly, but my mind was racing far ahead. My luxury travel and corporate event firm occupied the entire 12th floor of a sleek glass building. It was an empire I had built from nothing. I walked through the double glass doors and greeted my reception staff with a practiced and professional smile. Nobody looking at me would have guessed that my personal life had just imploded in Terminal 4 of JFK Airport. I made my way down the long corridor toward the corner office I shared with my business partner, Nora. Nora was the sharpest logistical mind I had ever met. She was ruthless when it came to business and fiercely protective of our company. When I walked into our office, she did not ask about my morning. She did not ask how the wedding cake tasting went. She was sitting rigidly at her desk, staring intensely at her dual monitors. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her fingers were flying across her keyboard. She looked up as I closed the door behind me. Her expression was deadly serious. "Alexis," she said, her voice tight with tension. "Why is our global booking software flagging a massive spike in pending international charges under your executive profile?" I froze. My hand was still resting on the doorknob. I walked over to her desk and looked at the glowing screen. Our proprietary software dashboard was displaying a cascade of high-level alerts. I saw the merchant names instantly: luxury villas in Ibiza, five-star resorts in Rome, elite penthouse suites in Paris. I felt a sudden and violent wave of nausea mixed with pure, unadulterated rage. Bradley had not just drained our personal liquid wedding cash. He had somehow accessed my secure work computer at our apartment and linked his entire European luxury tour to my elite corporate travel agency profile. He was actively using my business reputation to fund his fraternity boy midlife crisis. I pulled up a chair and sat down next to Nora. I stared at the screen as more charges populated in the pending queue. I explained to Nora exactly what I was looking at. Our travel agency operated on a highly exclusive corporate tier with global hospitality brands. When an executive client booked a trip through our portal using our specific corporate code, it automatically bypassed all standard personal credit limits. It signaled to the hotels and airlines that the client was a verified ultra-high net worth individual backed by our agency. It secured automatic elite penthouse upgrades, late checkouts, and VIP treatment at every venue. But the most dangerous perk of our corporate code was the billing structure. It deferred the final billing for 60 full days. The hotels and luxury services did not charge the credit card on file immediately upon booking. Instead, they held the corporate guarantee of our agency as collateral, allowing the client to enjoy their trip and pay the massive invoice 2 months later. Bradley knew all of this. He had listened to me talk about my business operations and corporate perks every night over dinner for the last 5 years. He knew our systems inside and out. He knew that by attaching my corporate profile to his reservations, he could travel like a billionaire without paying a single dime up front. He was treating my company like a giant interest-free credit line. Nora leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. She looked from the screen to me. "This is unauthorized use of a corporate billing code," she stated plainly. "It is technically fraud, Alexis. He is gambling with our company resources and putting our agency reputation on the line. If he defaults on these payments in 60 days, the vendors will come after our firm." I continued to stare at the flashing alerts on the dashboard. Nora was absolutely right. The financial exposure was massive. But as I looked at the administrative controls on the screen, a sudden and brilliant realization hit me. I was not just a victim in this scenario. I was the primary account holder. I was the chief executive of the firm. I possessed the absolute power to intervene. I controlled the master switch for every single corporate guarantee in our system. I realized that I could instantly revoke the corporate authorization on every hotel flight and VIP service he had booked. The system was designed to protect the agency from fraudulent clients. The moment I clicked the button to remove my company guarantee, the deferred billing perk would vanish. The hospitality vendors would instantly demand immediate payment in full for the luxury services. The massive financial liability would shift instantly from my agency directly onto whatever personal credit cards Bradley had put on file at the front desk. And because I knew he had already drained our joint account and maxed out his own personal cards to secure his initial flights, I knew exactly what would happen when those hotels tried to run his cards. "We are not going to be held liable," I told Nora, my voice steady and cold. "I am going to cut him off, but first I need to see exactly how much damage he has done. I need to audit his entire itinerary before we pull the plug." I logged into my own administrative terminal and opened the back end of the booking software. I pulled up Bradley's complete European travel manifest. It was a masterclass in financial gluttony and sheer audacity. He had booked private cabanas at exclusive beach clubs. He had secured helicopter transfers between islands. He had reserved tables at Michelin star restaurants that usually required a 6-month waiting list. I systematically clicked through the reservations, saving PDF copies and taking screenshots of every unauthorized corporate code usage. I was building a fortress of evidence. I scrolled down to his upcoming travel arrangements. He was scheduled to leave Ibiza in 2 days and fly to France. I clicked on the flight manifest from Spain to Paris. I needed to see how much the first-class tickets were costing my firm, and I wanted to see the names of the fraternity brothers who were enabling this behavior. The flight details populated on my high-resolution monitor. I scanned the flight number, the departure time, and the premium seat assignments. Then I looked at the passenger list. I expected to see Chad and the other men from his college days. I expected to see 4 male names listed on the group reservation. Instead, I saw only 2 names. The primary passenger was listed as Bradley. I moved my eyes down to the secondary passenger listed directly below him in the adjacent first-class seat. The breath completely left my lungs. I blinked and stared at the screen, hoping my eyes were playing tricks on me. It was not Chad. It was not any of his college friends. It was a female name. I sat frozen in my ergonomic office chair. The hum of the city traffic outside my window seemed to fade away completely. The name on the official flight manifest was staring back at me in stark black text. It was a name I recognized immediately. It was a name that had been spoken in my apartment countless times over the last 3 years. It was the name of his female coworker, the woman he always told me not to worry about, the woman he claimed was just a friend. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with sickening force. The midlife crisis, the sudden need for space, the aggressive drain of our wedding funds, and the use of my corporate upgrades for a romantic penthouse in Paris. He was not on a boys' trip to find his youth. He was on a luxury vacation with another woman, and he was using my business to pay for it. I stared at the glowing letters on the monitor. The sheer scale of his betrayal was almost difficult to comprehend. He had looked me in the eyes at the airport terminal and told me I was too domestic. He had handed me his winter coat while knowing exactly who he was meeting in Europe. He had allowed his mother to ambush me at lunch and demand I pay for a wedding he clearly had no intention of attending. Every single word out of his mouth had been a calculated deception designed to buy him time while he leveraged my hard work to impress his mistress. Nora noticed my silence. She rolled her chair over to my desk and looked at my screen. She read the names on the passenger manifest. She looked at me, her expression shifting from professional concern to fierce protective anger. I reached for my mouse. My hand was no longer shaking. The sadness and confusion were completely gone. I closed the flight manifest window and opened the main administrative control panel for the corporate travel system. I looked at Nora and gave her a tight, resolute smile. He wanted a luxury European getaway, I said quietly. I am going to give him an unforgettable experience. I sat in my ergonomic office chair and stared at the high-resolution monitor. The secondary passenger listed on the premium flight manifest from Ibiza to Paris was not Chad. It was not any of the fraternity brothers Bradley had claimed he was traveling with. The name glowing on the screen made my blood run completely cold. Justine. I read the letters over and over again, hoping my exhausted brain was making a mistake. But the corporate booking system did not make mistakes. The system required exact government-issued identification to secure international travel. There was no ambiguity. It was her. Justine was Bradley's 29-year-old coworker. She was the junior marketing associate he had spent the last 3 years telling me not to worry about. I remembered every argument we ever had about her. I remembered the late-night text messages he would dismiss as work emergencies. I remembered the times he would stay late at the office claiming he was mentoring her on a new advertising campaign. Whenever I expressed even a hint of discomfort, Bradley would turn the situation around on me. He would call me paranoid. He would tell me I was projecting my own stress onto our relationship. He looked me in the eye multiple times and swore she was like a little sister to him. He said I should be embarrassed for feeling threatened by a junior employee. Now I was looking at undeniable proof that every single one of my instincts had been absolutely correct. He had gaslighted me for years. He had made me feel like I was crazy for questioning his loyalty. And all the while he was planning a luxury European getaway with the exact woman he swore meant nothing to him. The betrayal was so profound it felt physical. He did not just want a break to find his youth. He wanted a romantic vacation with his mistress, and he had the sheer audacity to use my hard-earned money and my professional reputation to make it happen. Nora sat quietly at her desk watching me process the information. She did not offer empty platitudes or tell me everything would be okay. She knew me better than that. She knew I needed facts and data. I took a deep breath and placed my hand back on my mouse. I needed to see exactly how deep this deception went. If he was flying her first class to Paris, I needed to know where they were staying. I navigated away from the flight manifest and opened the lodging portal for his upcoming French itinerary. I cross-referenced the hotel bookings he had secured using my corporate authorization code. If he was truly on a trip with his fraternity brothers, he would have booked a standard double room with twin beds. He would have booked a suite large enough to accommodate 4 grown men. I clicked on the reservation details for their stay in Paris. The screen loaded a confirmation for a highly exclusive 5-star hotel overlooking the Seine River. It was a property my agency frequently used for high-profile celebrity clients. I read the room description. He had not booked a standard room. He had reserved the premier romantic honeymoon suite. The reservation included a king-sized canopy bed, a private balcony facing the Eiffel Tower, and an automated request for scattered rose petals upon arrival. But the detail that truly solidified my rage was the name attached to the room reservation. He had not put the hotel suite under his own name. He had booked the romantic penthouse explicitly under Justine's name. The pieces fell into place perfectly. Bradley was playing the role of a wealthy, successful businessman to impress his 29-year-old mistress. He was giving her the ultimate luxury experience. He was letting her check into a world-class penthouse under her own name, making her feel like royalty. And he was doing all of this using my corporate guarantee. He was using the power and influence of the travel agency I built with my own blood, sweat, and tears to finance his infidelity. He was treating my company like his own personal piggy bank to woo another woman. The cost of the Parisian honeymoon suite alone was staggering. It was billed at nearly $5,000 a night. He had booked it for 4 nights. That was $20,000 in lodging alone, not including the room service, the spa treatments, or the premium champagne he had undoubtedly requested. Because he used my corporate code, the hotel would not charge a single dime until 60 days after checkout. Justine probably thought she was dating a millionaire. She had no idea her luxurious romantic getaway was being floated on the back of his fiancé's business. I systematically moved through the rest of the itinerary. I found a private sunset cruise reserved in Rome. I found a luxury convertible car rental secured in the south of France. Every single reservation was tied to my corporate profile, and every single one was designed for 2 people. There was no boys' trip. Chad and the other fraternity brothers were likely just a convenient cover story, or perhaps they were enjoying their own cheap hostels while Bradley lived like a king with Justine. Either way, the entire narrative he had sold me at the airport terminal was a carefully constructed fabrication. I picked up my phone from the desk. I needed to see what he was doing right now. I needed to see how he was portraying this massive lie to the rest of the world. I opened the Instagram application and navigated to his profile. He had always been obsessed with his social media image. He loved curating his feed to make his mediocre life look spectacular. I refreshed his page. A new photo had been posted just 10 minutes ago. It was a highly curated cinematic shot taken on the deck of a yacht. The Mediterranean Sea sparkled brilliantly in the background, catching the golden hour sunlight. In the foreground, resting on a polished teak wood table, were 2 crystal champagne flutes. They were perfectly positioned to show off the expensive bottle of vintage champagne resting in an ice bucket nearby. There were no faces in the photo, but the implication was clear. It was a picture of intimate luxury. I read the caption beneath the photo. It was short and incredibly arrogant. It simply said, "Finally finding my peace." I stared at those 5 words. Finding his peace? He was finding his peace on a yacht I was paying for drinking champagne my corporate account had secured while sitting across from his mistress. He had left me standing in an airport holding his winter coat while our wedding vendors demanded $50,000. He had allowed his mother to insult my work ethic. And now he was publicly gloating about his newfound freedom. The last lingering trace of sadness evaporated from my body. I did not feel heartbroken anymore. I felt an intense, terrifying sense of purpose. I took a screenshot of the Instagram post. I opened a new secure folder on my computer desktop and named it Bradley Evidence. I dropped the screenshot into the folder alongside the downloaded PDF copies of his flight manifests, the romantic hotel reservations, and the itemized lists of his unauthorized corporate spending. I looked at the folder containing the undeniable proof of his fraud and his infidelity. A normal woman would call her family and cry. A normal woman would cancel the wedding, call the caterers, and spend the next 6 months mourning the end of her relationship. She would let him come home from Europe, play the victim, and eventually force him to pack his bags. But I was not a normal woman. I was a business owner who had fought tooth and nail to survive in a cutthroat corporate industry. I knew how to handle liabilities. I knew how to manage risks. And I knew exactly how to dismantle a bad investment. Canceling the wedding would be too easy. It would allow him to maintain his false narrative. It would let him tell his friends and his mother that we simply grew apart and that he had made the right choice by taking a break. It would let Justine believe she had won a wealthy, successful man. I was not going to give him the satisfaction of a clean, quiet break. I was not going to let him keep his dignity while I dealt with the fallout of his deception. I closed the evidence folder and looked across the desk at Nora. She had been waiting patiently, letting me process the reality of the situation. Her eyes were sharp and ready. "I am not just going to cancel the wedding," I told her, my voice ringing with absolute certainty. "Canceling the wedding means I lose the deposits. It means I spend the next 3 weeks dealing with pitying phone calls from extended family members. It means he gets to enjoy his European vacation and come home to a polite breakup." Nora leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk. "What exactly are you going to do, Alexis?" I smiled, and it was the coldest, most genuine smile I had worn all day. "I am going to hijack it," I said. "I am going to take every single thing he values and tear it away from him while he is standing thousands of miles away. I am going to let him enjoy his peace for a few more days. And then I am going to pull the floor out from under him." I picked up my phone again and opened my contact list. I had a premier luxury venue secured for a Saturday 3 weeks from now. I had $50,000 due in 48 hours. And I happened to know a major tech client who was currently desperate for a last-minute event space. The wedding was dead, but the business opportunity was just beginning. I closed the flight manifest window and let out a long, slow breath. Nora stood by my side, her eyes locked onto the dual monitors as the digital footprint of Bradley's betrayal continued to expand across our corporate travel dashboard. Over the next 24 hours, I sat from my office terminal as Bradley's highly curated cinematic fantasy unfolded on social media for our entire social circle to see. He had moved from Ibiza to Paris, and he was documenting every single moment with pseudo-philosophical captions. He posted a high-resolution photo of the Parisian morning light breaking over a private balcony overlooking the Seine River. In the shot, you could see a beautifully arranged breakfast tray for 2. His caption read that true maturity meant having the courage to break free from the mundane domestic life and unshackle the soul from the cages of routine. The hypocrisy of his words was staggering, but what interested me more was the immediate reaction of our mutual acquaintances. Within hours, my personal messaging applications began to flood with notifications. Pitying direct messages from our country club circle and frantic texts from friends began piling up on my screen. They were all asking if the wedding was completely off. They wanted to know why Bradley was posting about freedom while I was back in New York handling the final contracts alone. Some offered to bring over wine to comfort me, while others subtly suggested that I should have seen the warning signs earlier, because a man like Bradley was never meant to be tied down by a career-obsessed woman. I read every message with a stone-cold expression, but I did not reply to a single person. I was systematically collecting the names of everyone who bought into his preposterous lie. By Tuesday afternoon, the New York weather had turned bitterly cold, but the fire in my chest had hardened into a calm, strategic resolve. I was sitting at my executive desk, finalizing the non-disclosure agreements for a massive tech product launch that would officially replace my wedding day, when my phone vibrated violently against the polished wood. The caller identification displayed Bradley's name. He was calling me from his 5-star Parisian honeymoon suite. I did not answer. I pressed the decline button and waited. Seconds later, a text message popped up on my screen. It was written with a casual, boundary-crossing tone that made it clear he believed he still held complete control over my emotions, my schedule, and my financial resources. "Hey, Alexis," the text message read. "I know you are probably still in your feelings about my break, but we need to keep things moving. Make sure the florist changes the ceremony centerpieces from white lilies to pink peonies. Lilies look far too funeral-esque, and I want the aesthetic to feel lively when I get back from Europe. Just call the floral vendor and get it sorted out today before the deadline." I stared at the words on the screen. He had just cleared out $40,000 from our Forever Fund, overdrawn our joint account, and run off to Europe with his coworker, Justine. Yet he had the absolute audacity to text me about floral centerpieces, as if he were simply away on a mundane weekend business trip. He genuinely believed that I was sitting in our empty apartment, weeping over bridal magazines and waiting efficiently to fulfill his domestic demands. I placed my fingers on the keyboard and typed out a direct, freezing response. I did not include any emotional exclamation points or desperate questions. I simply wrote out a single sentence. "How is Justine enjoying the pink peonies in Paris with you, Bradley?" The response from his end was almost instantaneous. The 3 digital typing dots appeared, snapped away, and then reappeared with frantic, erratic energy. The text message that followed was a masterclass in aggressive gaslighting and desperate psychological projection. "What the hell is wrong with you, Alexis?" he typed back. "You are tracking my flight coordinates now. You are actively spying on my professional colleagues. Justine is a junior associate who just happened to be in Europe for a regional conference this week. I ran into her completely by coincidence at a cafe near the Louvre, and we decided to talk about office politics. This boundary-crossing jealousy is exactly why I needed a break from you before committing to a lifetime contract. Your toxic insecurity is suffocating the relationship, and you are completely fabricating an affair narrative out of absolutely nothing." I did not take the bait. I did not send him the first-class passenger manifest that explicitly proved he had booked her adjacent seat weeks in advance under our corporate travel discount code. I did not send him the data files of the luxury honeymoon suite booked directly under her legal name and billed to my firm's profile. I knew that confronting a narcissist with early evidence only allowed them time to formulate a better lie or align their story with his mother, Beverly. I needed him to believe his deception was working perfectly. I needed him to stay arrogant and complacent on the other side of the Atlantic while I quietly dismantled his entire existence from New York. Bradley must have interpreted my silence as submission, because another text message arrived 5 minutes later, carrying a sharp, patronizing ultimatum. "If you do not change your attitude, stop acting crazy, and stop harassing my coworkers, I am going to extend my break through the actual wedding date," he threatened. "I will just stay out here in Europe through the summer and let the date pass without me. The choice is yours, Alexis. You either calm down and accept that I need this space, or you can explain to our 200 guests why there is no groom at the altar on Saturday." I looked at the screen and felt a profound sense of total liberation. He genuinely thought the threat of public humiliation would force me into compliance. He thought the fear of an empty altar would make me beg for his return. I placed my thumb on the screen and typed out a single character. I sent him a simple thumbs-up emoji. I did not add a single word. I locked my screen and turned the phone face down on my desk. I turned to look at Nora, who was sitting across the office watching me with a look of intense anticipation. "It is time," I told her calmly. "Call the legal team and tell them we are moving to phase 2 of our strategy immediately." I opened my business laptop and pulled up the contact profile for our luxury real estate broker, Mr. Davenport. Bradley and I lived in a sprawling penthouse apartment overlooking the Hudson River. The unit featured floor-to-ceiling windows, a private terrace, and a custom closet where Bradley kept his prized collection of limited-edition custom sneakers and designer suits. He loved that apartment because it gave him the social currency he desperately craved when entertaining his corporate colleagues. But Bradley had forgotten one crucial detail when he signed the paperwork 3 years ago. Because his credit history was completely hollowed out by old debts and mediocre marketing salaries, the landlord had refused to accept his signature on the luxury residential contract. The lease was exclusively under my corporate agency name, and every single monthly payment was drawn directly from my private business operating accounts. I dialed Mr. Davenport's direct line. He answered on the second ring. "Good afternoon, Alexis," he said. "How can I help you today?" I told him that I needed to execute the immediate vacation of the property. "Mr. Davenport," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion, "I need to invoke the early termination clause on the Hudson penthouse lease effective immediately. I want the locks changed by Friday morning at 9 a.m. sharp. I will have my assistant send over the formal corporate authorization letters before the end of the business day so everything is legally documented." There was a brief pause on the line as Mr. Davenport checked his system database. "Alexis, that clause requires a 30-day notice or a standard penalty fee equivalent to 2 months of rent," he explained carefully. "Are you certain you want to proceed with this sudden transition before your wedding date?" I told him I would wire the full penalty fee from my corporate business reserve account within the next 10 minutes. I want the termination process today. I am also scheduling a professional junk removal and storage service to arrive at the property on Thursday afternoon. They will be packing up every single item of male clothing, footwear, and personal belongings in that apartment. Everything will be moved into an off-site secure storage unit outside the city matrix, and I will mail the access key directly to his mother's house immediately without fail. I hung up the phone with the real estate broker and placed the receiver gently on my desk. The finality of that conversation settled over me like a heavy protective blanket. Bradley had used that luxury penthouse apartment as his ultimate status symbol to impress his corporate colleagues for the past 3 years. He loved hosting lavish dinner parties, pouring expensive wine that I had purchased, and standing on the balcony pretending he was the king of the world. Now his entire kingdom was being packed into cardboard boxes by professional movers and shipped to a climate-controlled storage unit in New Jersey. The physical anchor of our relationship was completely severed. I looked across the office at Nora. She had been listening to my end of the phone call with a look of absolute awe. She slowly closed her laptop and let out a long breath. We had successfully handled the apartment situation, but the massive ticking time bomb of the wedding venue still remained on my desk. I had exactly 48 hours to pay the final $50,000 installment to the historic luxury estate in the Hudson Valley, or forfeit the date entirely. Beverly had explicitly demanded that I pay the invoice with my own business income to spare her son the stress of dealing with it. She thought the threat of public humiliation would force my hand. She assumed I would rather absorb a massive financial loss than admit to our 200 guests that my wedding was falling apart. As I stared at the blinking cursor on my computer screen, the private line on my executive desk phone began to ring. It was a restricted number. I picked up the receiver and answered with my standard professional greeting. The voice on the other end belonged to Gavin Thorne. Gavin was the chief executive officer of a massive global technology conglomerate we had been aggressively pitching for the last 6 months. We were trying to secure the contract to handle their global corporate travel and their high-profile product launches. "Alexis," he said, his voice tight with an unusual amount of stress. "I know we have not officially signed the retainer agreements with your agency yet, but I am currently facing an absolute logistical nightmare. I need to know if your firm can pull off a miracle." I sat up straighter in my ergonomic chair and grabbed my notepad. I told him to explain the situation calmly. Gavin took a deep breath. "We are launching our new flagship software platform in exactly 3 weeks. It is the most important product rollout in our company history. We had an exclusive luxury resort booked in Miami for a massive 3-day corporate gala. 200 of our top global investors and industry media representatives are already booked to attend. But the venue just experienced a catastrophic plumbing failure. The entire main ballroom is under 2 feet of water and they just canceled our contract. I have 3 weeks to find a luxury estate on the East Coast that can host a high-octane corporate event with premium catering and full security protocols. Gavin continued, his voice laced with desperation. I need absolute exclusivity and I need it to look spectacular. Can your agency find me a venue on such short notice, or do I need to postpone a multi-million-dollar launch and look like a fool to my investors? My heart began to pound against my ribs with a steady rhythmic force. I looked down at the printed invoice for my wedding venue resting on my desk. The historic estate I had booked featured sprawling manicured gardens, a stunning glass conservatory for dining, and a massive ballroom with state-of-the-art acoustics. I had already arranged for a premium catering company, a string quartet, and top-tier security because Bradley insisted on feeling like a celebrity on his wedding day. The dates aligned perfectly. The logistical framework was already entirely in place. The massive crisis Gavin was facing was the exact solution to the financial nightmare Bradley had created for me. I did not hesitate for a single second. I looked at the wedding mood boards pinned to my office wall and instantly mentally converted them into corporate branding. The romantic white floral arrangements could be swapped for neon blue architectural lighting. The string quartet could be replaced by a high-energy electronic disc jockey. Gavin, I said, my voice projecting absolute calm and unwavering authority. You do not need to postpone your launch. I have a premier luxury estate in the Hudson Valley secured for those exact dates. It offers total privacy, sprawling grounds for outdoor demonstrations, and a glass conservatory that would look incredible illuminated with your corporate brand colors. I already have a 5-star catering team on standby and security protocols ready to deploy. I can transition the property into a corporate event space immediately. There was a heavy, stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Gavin breathing as he processed my words. You have an exclusive luxury estate just sitting on standby for those exact dates, he asked, his tone shifting from outright panic to sheer disbelief. I smiled even though he could not see my face. In the corporate event industry, we always maintain backup luxury properties for our highest-tier clients. I lied smoothly and confidently. I can send you the property prospectus and the layout schematics within 5 minutes. If you approve the venue, we can execute the contracts today. Gavin let out a loud, booming bark of relieved laughter. Alexis, if you can actually pull this off and save this launch, I will sign your agency as our exclusive global travel management firm for the next 5 years. Send me the contract right now. I hung up the phone and looked at Nora. She had heard enough of my side of the conversation to understand exactly what was happening. Her mouth was slightly open in shock. You are not canceling the wedding venue, she whispered, her eyes wide. I shook my head and pulled up the venue contract on my computer. I am not canceling anything, I told her. I am legally transferring the contract from a personal wedding to a corporate gala. I am taking the $50,000 invoice his mother tried to bury me with, and I am turning it into the most lucrative business deal in our company history. I immediately dialed the direct line for Simone, the primary event coordinator at the luxury estate. She answered the phone expecting to discuss seating charts and bridal party arrival times. Simone, I said, keeping my tone brisk and professional, we are making a massive pivot on the event scheduled for 3 weeks from now. The wedding is off, but the date is absolutely still booked. I am officially transferring the reservation from a personal contract to a corporate event contract under my agency. Simone gasped slightly, clearly shocked by the sudden change, but her professional training quickly took over. I need you to send over the updated corporate addendums, I instructed her. I am also paying the final $50,000 balance today via commercial wire transfer. We are hosting a high-profile technology launch instead of a wedding reception. I need you to cancel the White Rose order and put me in touch with your commercial lighting vendor immediately. By the time I finished the phone call with Simone, my email inbox chimed with a new message. It was the signed electronic contract from Gavin Thorne, officially authorizing my agency to handle the product launch. Attached to the contract was a confirmation receipt from his accounting department. They had already initiated a priority wire transfer to cover the event costs and our agency retaining fees. Less than an hour later, my phone vibrated on my desk. It was an automated notification from my business banking application. Just days ago, I had sat in my car feeling completely sick as I watched an alert inform me that Bradley had stolen $15,000 for a villa in Ibiza. Now I was looking at a very different kind of alert. A massive six-figure retainer had just cleared and deposited directly into my corporate operating account. The influx of capital was staggering. The funds more than covered the $50,000 venue payment, the premium vendor upgrades, and my agency commission. In the span of a single afternoon, I had completely neutralized the financial trap Beverly and Bradley had tried to set for me. I was no longer a frantic bride scrambling to cover the costs of a ruined wedding. I was a highly paid executive directing a multi-million-dollar corporate production. I was completely financially untouchable. Bradley had told me to find a hobby outside of work while he was away on his European vacation. He had mocked my dedication to my business, claiming it made me boring and domestic. But that same business had just provided me with the ultimate shield against his betrayal. I closed the banking application and felt a surge of absolute power rush through my veins. Every single liability had been eliminated. The apartment lease was terminated. The wedding venue was successfully repurposed. The corporate client was secured. The only thing left to deal with was the man sitting in a luxury honeymoon suite in Paris with his co-worker Justine. I turned my attention back to my primary desktop monitor. I opened the administrative control panel for my corporate travel portal. I pulled up Bradley's active European itinerary. It was time to cut the cord. I stared at the glowing blue interface of my corporate travel portal. The administrative dashboard was a complex system I had designed from scratch when I first launched my agency. It was the digital nerve center of my entire business. Through this secure gateway, I controlled millions of dollars in executive travel budgets and managed the luxury itineraries of some of the most powerful corporate figures in the world. Now I was using this very same system to track the movements of the man who had just destroyed my personal life. I placed my hands on the keyboard and took a slow, steady breath. The anger that had been burning inside my chest was completely gone. In its place was a cold and calculating focus. I was no longer a heartbroken bride dealing with a canceled wedding. I was a chief executive officer eliminating a massive financial liability from my company ledgers. I moved my mouse and clicked on the search bar at the top of the screen. I typed in Bradley's specific traveler identification number. The system processed the request for a few seconds before populating the screen with a long, scrolling list of active luxury reservations. I needed to isolate every single booking he had made using my agency corporate code. I started at the top of the list and worked my way down systematically, verifying the dates and the merchant names. The sheer volume of his unauthorized spending was breathtaking. He had not just booked a simple vacation. He had constructed an elaborate multi-city European tour designed to project the image of unlimited wealth and elite social status. I opened the details for the first leg of his journey. It was the Parisian penthouse suite he had booked under Justine's name. He had reserved the room for 5 consecutive days. The base rate for the suite was astronomical, but the added luxury amenities he had attached to the corporate billing profile were staggering. He had requested daily in-room couples massages, private chauffeur services for shopping excursions, and vintage champagne delivered every single evening at sunset. He had even booked a private after-hours tour of a prestigious art museum. Every single one of these elite experiences was secured strictly by my company name. He was using the reputation and the financial backing of my firm to play the role of a billionaire for a junior marketing associate. I scrolled further down the manifest to the second leg of his trip. After leaving Paris, he had arranged a private jet transfer to Rome. The aviation charter alone cost more than his annual salary. Upon arriving in Italy, he had booked a sprawling historic villa overlooking the city center. He did not stop at luxury lodging. He had reserved VIP tables at 3 different exclusive nightclubs across the city. I clicked on the specific details for the nightclub reservations. He had pre-ordered thousands of dollars in premium liquor bottle service to impress his fraternity brothers and his mistress. To top it all off, he had secured a luxury convertible sports car rental for a planned week-long drive down the Amalfi Coast. It was a masterpiece of financial gluttony. I needed to ensure that the financial trap I was building was completely inescapable. In the corporate travel industry, a guarantee code acts as a master key. When an executive client checks into a luxury hotel, they are required to put a personal credit card on file for incidental charges. But the actual massive cost of the room and the premium services are deferred directly to the corporate account. The hotel front desk management never actually runs the personal card for the large balances because the agency guarantee protects them against default. Bradley understood this system perfectly. He knew that his own maxed-out personal credit cards would never actually be charged by the hotels. He believed he was completely insulated from the financial consequences of his actions. He was entirely wrong. I moved my mouse cursor over the master control settings for his specific travel itinerary. Because I was the primary account administrator, I possessed the unilateral authority to change his status from a verified corporate executive to an unauthorized user. When I made that specific system change, the software would automatically send an urgent digital alert to every single hotel, airline, and car rental agency on his manifest. The alert would instantly revoke the deferred billing agreement. The hospitality vendors would immediately panic upon losing the corporate guarantee. Following standard industry protocol, they would automatically shift the massive financial liability directly onto the personal credit card Bradley had physically swiped at the front desk during his initial check-in. I highlighted every single reservation on his European tour. I checked the digital boxes next to the Parisian penthouse, the private aviation flights, the Roman villa, the luxury sports car, and the VIP nightclub tables. I selected the dining reservations and the spa packages. I isolated absolutely everything he had touched with my corporate code. I verified the selections one final time, ensuring that I had not missed a single charge. I was going to leave him with absolutely no safety net and no alternative lines of credit. I wanted the full weight of his extravagant spending to crash down on him all at once. I took a deep breath and felt a profound sense of calm wash over my entire body. I moved my cursor to the bright red button positioned on the top right corner of the screen. The text on the button read, "Revoke Corporate Guarantee Unauthorized User." I did not hesitate. I did not second-guess my decision. I pressed down firmly on my mouse and clicked the button. A secondary warning screen immediately popped up, blocking the interface. It asked me to confirm the cancellation of services and provide a mandatory reason for the sudden revocation. I clicked on the drop-down menu and scrolled through the options. I selected the category marked Suspected Fraudulent Activity. I moved my mouse down to the final confirmation prompt and clicked Accept. The screen refreshed instantly. All the bright green active status indicators located next to his various reservations immediately turned a glaring flashing red. A status bar appeared at the bottom of the screen, tracking the progress, as the system began transmitting the revocation codes to the global hospitality networks. I watched the progress bar hit 100%. It was officially done. The corporate safety net was completely obliterated. Bradley was now financially exposed and entirely vulnerable on another continent. His personal credit cards, which were already heavily drained from his initial flight purchases, and the stolen wedding funds, were about to be hit with tens of thousands of dollars in immediate pending charges. I leaned back in my leather office chair and let out a long, satisfied breath. The intense adrenaline that had been fueling my actions all day slowly transformed into a deep and satisfying contentment. The crisis was managed, and the liability was removed. I looked at the digital clock on my computer monitor. It was late evening in New York. The office building was entirely empty and the floor was perfectly quiet. I did the mental math for the international time zone difference. It was approaching 2 in the morning in Rome, where Bradley and his friends were currently scheduled to be operating on the second leg of their trip. I pictured exactly what he was doing at this very moment. He was likely standing in the marble lobby of a luxury Italian hotel or sitting at a premium VIP table in an exclusive nightclub. He was probably surrounded by expensive bottles of alcohol he could not actually afford, laughing with his fraternity brothers and trying to impress Justine with his manufactured wealth. He was completely oblivious to the fact that his entire financial reality had just been dismantled from a desk 12 stories above Manhattan. He was living in the final few minutes of his arrogant fantasy, right before the heavy consequences of reality came crashing through the door. I stood up from my desk and walked over to the small executive wet bar located in the corner of my office. I opened the glass cabinet doors and reached for a bottle of premium red wine I had been saving for a major milestone celebration. Today certainly qualified as a milestone. I opened the bottle and poured myself a generous glass, watching the dark liquid swirl against the crystal. I walked slowly back to my desk, enjoying the absolute silence of the room. The only sound was the faint hum of the city traffic moving along the streets far below my window. I sat down and placed the wine glass on my desk. I opened my primary business email inbox and kept my eyes locked on the screen. I knew exactly how these elite hospitality systems operated. They functioned with ruthless, robotic efficiency. When a corporate guarantee is officially revoked for suspected fraud, the automated billing software immediately attempts to authorize the full outstanding balance on the personal backup card on file. I took a slow sip of the rich red wine and waited patiently in the quiet office. Less than 5 minutes later, my email inbox softly chimed. A new message appeared at the top of the screen, sent directly from the billing department of the Parisian hotel. The subject line read, "Credit authorization declined." A few seconds later, another email arrived from the private jet charter service carrying the exact same subject line. I took another sip of wine and watched as the automated decline notifications began to roll in one by one. The financial avalanche had officially started, and Bradley was standing right at the bottom of the mountain. The digital chimes from my email inbox echoed through the silent office. Each notification was a beautiful testament to the flawless execution of my plan. I leaned back in my leather chair and watched the screen as the dominoes began to fall exactly as I had calculated. The first wave of rejections came from the high-end merchants who process nightly audits. The luxury car rental agency in the south of France sent an automated alert stating the security deposit authorization had failed. Then came the private yacht charter company in Ibiza. Their billing system attempted to secure the outstanding balance for the vintage champagne and the private chef. It was instantly denied. I took another sip of my red wine and imagined the scene unfolding thousands of miles away. It was past 2 in the morning in Rome. Bradley was likely standing in the center of an exclusive VIP nightclub, surrounded by pulsing lights and loud electronic music. He had probably just tried to order another round of premium bottle service to impress his fraternity brothers and his mistress Justine. I knew exactly how elite hospitality managers operated when a corporate fraud alert flashed on their point-of-sale systems. They did not wait until morning. They acted immediately to secure their assets. Right on cue, my personal cell phone illuminated on the surface of my desk. The screen displayed Bradley's contact photo. It was a picture we had taken last summer during a weekend trip to the Hamptons. He was smiling broadly, looking like a man who had not a single care in the world. I did not reach for the phone. I sat perfectly still and let it ring. The vibrant digital screen cast a harsh glow across the polished wood of my desk. I watched the incoming call interface pulse until it finally timed out and went to voicemail. Less than 2 minutes later, a voicemail notification popped up. I pressed play and listened through the high-quality speakerphone. "Alexis, pick up the phone," Bradley said, his voice laced with heavy background noise and deep, arrogant annoyance. "My card just declined at the club and the waiter is giving me a ridiculous attitude. You need to call your travel agency support line and fix your corporate code immediately. It is incredibly embarrassing to deal with this when I'm just trying to find my peace. Text me when it is sorted out." I smiled at the sheer audacity of his message. He was standing in a foreign country actively cheating on me and stealing my money, yet he still expected me to play the role of his obedient personal assistant. I saved the audio file to my secure evidence folder. I did not respond. I knew the situation was about to escalate from a minor inconvenience at a nightclub to a full-blown international financial crisis. The phone rang again 20 minutes later. I let it go straight to voicemail. I pressed play on the second recording. The background music was gone. He was clearly standing outside on a quiet street, and his tone had shifted from arrogance to genuine confusion and rising panic. "Alexis, I really need you to answer the phone right now," he demanded, his breath hitching slightly. The club manager just came over to our VIP table with two large security guards. They told me my corporate guarantee was revoked for suspected fraud. They forced us to leave the table and made me run my personal credit card for the $4,000 bar tab. My card was declined. Chad had to empty his checking account just to let us leave the building. "Call me back right now and tell me what is going on with your company software." I took a slow, deeply satisfying sip of my wine. The walls were closing in on him. The protective bubble of my corporate wealth had completely evaporated, leaving him exposed to the harsh reality of his own empty bank accounts. I waited patiently for the final stage of his realization. I knew he would have to return to his hotel eventually. He would have to face the front desk staff at the luxury Roman villa he had booked. An hour passed. The city of New York was entirely quiet outside my window. My phone lit up for the third time. The incoming call vibrated against the desk with frantic, desperate energy. I let it ring out. The third voicemail notification appeared. I pressed play and leaned forward, resting my chin on my hands. "Alexis, please pick up the phone," Bradley begged. The audio was distorted by his frantic breathing and the echoing acoustics of a large marble lobby. He was no longer annoyed or confused. He was in a state of absolute, unadulterated terror. "I am standing at the front desk of the hotel," he stammered, his voice cracking with panic. "The night manager just intercepted us in the lobby. He said the corporate travel agency canceled the payment guarantee for the entire stay. They are demanding $30,000 right now for the penthouse suite, the room service, and the damages." I tried to give them every personal credit card I have, but they are all declining because the joint account is completely empty. "Alexis, they are threatening to call the Italian authorities. They are saying they will have the Carabinieri arrest me for defrauding a luxury hospitality provider. Justine is sitting in the lobby crying, and Chad is refusing to help me. Please, Alexis, I know we needed a break, but I need you to fix this. Please call the bank. I need you." I sat in my office and listened to the sound of his complete destruction. He was begging for my help while standing next to the woman he had chosen over our future. He was asking me to rescue him from the exact financial trap he had built with his own two hands. I reached out and tapped the screen, saving the final desperate voicemail into my secure folder. The audit was complete. The liability was fully transferred. I shut down my computer monitors, washed my crystal wine glass in the executive sink, and locked the office doors. I took a car service back to the luxury apartment that was now legally solely mine, and I slept more peacefully than I had in years. The next morning, I arrived at my office at 8 sharp. I was wearing a sharp-tailored designer suit, and my mind was razor-focused. I knew exactly who would be coming through my doors today. Bradley was stranded in Italy with no money and a looming threat of arrest. His fraternity brothers were broke, and his mistress was useless. He had only one lifeline left. He had to call his mother. At precisely 9:30 in the morning, the heavy glass doors of my agency swung open. Beverly marched past the reception desk, ignoring my administrative staff completely. She was wearing her expensive country club tennis attire, and her face was flushed a deep, angry red. Her designer handbag swung wildly from her arm as she stormed down the long corridor directly toward my corner office. She did not bother to knock. She pushed the door open and glared at me with absolute fury. "Alexis!" she snapped, marching up to my desk and slamming her hands down on the polished wood. "Turn the credit cards back on right this instant." I did not flinch. I did not break eye contact. I sat comfortably in my chair and folded my hands together, resting them on the surface of my desk. "Good morning, Beverly," I said, my voice perfectly calm and measured. "It is incredibly inappropriate for you to bypass my security desk. What can I do for you today?" "Do not play games with me," Beverly shouted, her voice echoing off the glass walls. "Bradley called me at 4 in the morning, weeping. He is trapped in Rome, and the hotel is refusing to let him access his belongings until a $30,000 bill is settled. He said your company travel software malfunctioned and canceled his payment guarantees. You are ruining his trip. He is over there trying to find his youth and relieve his stress before your wedding, and you are punishing him by cutting off his funds. You call your bank right now and authorize those payments. I looked at the woman who had ambushed me at lunch just 2 days ago. The woman who had blamed my workaholic nature for her son's obvious flaws. The woman who had demanded I use my personal business income to pay for a wedding her son was actively sabotaging. I opened the top drawer of my desk. I reached inside and pulled out a thick stack of printed papers. It was the fully itemized, heavily documented list of every single unauthorized transaction Bradley had attempted to push through my corporate accounts. I placed the stack of papers directly in front of her. My software did not malfunction, Beverly, I stated clearly. I revoked his access because he was committing corporate fraud. Beverly scoffed and waved a dismissive hand at the paperwork. Corporate fraud. Do not be ridiculous, Alexis. He is your fiancé. He is entitled to use your travel perks. You are just being spiteful because he needed some space from your overbearing domestic routine. I stood up from my chair, drawing myself up to my full height. I looked down at her and tapped my index finger against the top page of the printed manifest. I suggest you read the names on these documents before you defend his journey of self-discovery, I told her coldly. Beverly looked down at the papers. Her eyes scanned the first page. I watched her expression change as she read the detailed line items. She saw the $20,000 billing invoice for the Parisian penthouse suite. She saw the charges for luxury couples massages and vintage champagne. And then she saw the name printed clearly on the primary guest registry. It did not say Chad. It did not say Bradley. Justine, she read aloud, her voice suddenly losing its aggressive edge. Why does this say Justine? Because your son is not on a boys' trip to find his youth. I explained, my voice slicing through the quiet office like a newly sharpened blade. He is on a luxury European vacation with his 29-year-old co-worker. He drained our joint wedding fund, taking $40,000 of my money to pay for his initial flights. When he ran out of cash, he hacked into my business portal and used my corporate agency guarantee to fund his romantic getaway with his mistress. He bought her expensive dinners, he rented yachts, and he even purchased luxury lingerie using my company billing profile. Beverly stared at this paperwork, her mouth slightly open. The color had completely drained from her face. She flipped to the second page, seeing the receipts for the VIP nightclub tables and the private aviation charters. The undeniable proof of his infidelity and his massive financial theft was staring her right in the face. He is stranded in Rome because I caught him. I continued, refusing to let her look away from the truth. I terminated the corporate guarantees. The hotel is holding him personally liable for the money he stole. I am not turning the credit cards back on Beverly. I am not saving him from the consequences of his own spectacular arrogance. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and desperate maternal panic. But Alexis, the Italian authorities, she stammered. They will arrest him. He does not have $30,000. You have to help him. You are supposed to be his partner. I leaned forward, planting both hands firmly on my desk, bringing my face inches from hers. I looked her dead in the eyes and delivered the final absolute truth. Your son is on a break, I told her, my voice echoing with total finality. So is my wallet. If he wants to fly home, he better hope you have enough room on your credit cards to bail him out. Now get out of my office. Beverly stood frozen for a fraction of a second before snatching the papers off the desk. She turned around and practically ran out of my office, the heavy glass doors swinging shut behind her. The trap had been fully sprung, and the massive weight of reality was finally crashing down upon them. Bradley was entirely on his own. I sat back down in my chair and turned my attention back to the massive corporate tech gala I was currently planning for the exact day of my canceled wedding. The real work was just beginning. I spent the remainder of the morning finalizing the catering contracts for my new corporate tech client. While I was selecting the perfect neon blue architectural lighting for the upcoming gala, the inevitable fallout of Bradley's Roman holiday was reaching its absolute peak. I knew exactly what was happening in Italy because the general manager of the luxury Roman villa kept me continually updated via a series of highly descriptive emails. Marco was a longtime professional acquaintance of mine, and he took great pleasure in documenting the spectacular demise of the arrogant man who had tried to defraud his prestigious historic hotel. According to Marco, the situation escalated right after breakfast. Bradley had been cornered in the grand marble lobby by the hotel management team and two heavily built private security guards. The hotel staff presented Bradley with the outstanding invoice of $30,000. They demanded immediate payment for the damages, the premium room service, and the excessive nightclub tabs that had bounced overnight. Bradley tried to play the role of the outraged wealthy executive. He yelled at the staff and demanded they respect his corporate status. Marco simply smiled and informed him that the corporate agency had explicitly flagged him for fraud. Marco told Bradley that the Italian local police known as the Carabinieri were currently on their way to the property to investigate the theft of services. Just as the terrifying reality of the situation was setting in, Chad and the other fraternity brothers descended the grand staircase. They were wearing expensive resort wear and loudly complaining about the noise in the lobby. They walked up to Bradley expecting him to handle the situation so they could move on to their planned afternoon yacht excursion. Marco turned to the group of men and politely informed them that nobody would be leaving the property until the massive bill was settled in full. Bradley looked at his closest friends. He looked at the men he had traveled across the globe with to find his lost youth. He dropped his arrogant facade and pleaded with them. He admitted that his personal credit cards were completely maxed out and that his joint accounts were frozen. He begged Chad to put the $30,000 balance on his personal credit card. He promised he would pay him back as soon as he returned to New York and sorted out the misunderstanding with my travel agency. Chad looked at the itemized invoice resting on the marble reception desk. He looked at the staggering numbers, and then he looked at Bradley. The supposed unbreakable bond of their lifelong brotherhood evaporated into thin air. The second actual financial liability was introduced. Chad laughed right in Bradley's face. He told Bradley that brotherhood only extended as far as the free drinks and the complimentary luxury upgrades. The fraternity brothers had only agreed to fly to Europe because Bradley had promised them an all-expenses-paid billionaire experience. They were perfectly happy to drink my vintage champagne and sleep in my upgraded hotel suites, but they were absolutely not going to absorb a massive debt for a man who had lied about his wealth. Chad and the other men did not even hesitate. They grabbed their designer luggage and walked straight past the security guards. They told the hotel manager that all the reservations were strictly under Bradley's name, and they held no legal responsibility for his fraudulent activities. They walked out the heavy glass doors of the Roman villa, leaving Bradley completely alone and surrounded by hostile hotel security. They called their own cabs to the airport to save themselves. If losing his friends was a humiliating blow, losing his mistress was an absolute execution. 10 minutes after the fraternity brothers abandoned ship, Justine came down to the lobby. She was wearing a beautiful silk resort dress that Bradley had purchased for her using my money. She walked up to the reception desk, expecting to be whisked away to a private lunch overlooking the Colosseum. Instead, she found Bradley sweating profusely and arguing with Marco about collateral. Justine saw the security guards. She heard Marco threatening to have Bradley arrested and thrown into an Italian jail cell. Bradley turned to his young, beautiful coworker with a look of utter desperation. He grabbed her hands and begged her to help him. He asked her to use her own savings to cover a portion of the bill so they could escape the hotel and salvage the rest of their romantic getaway. Justine looked at the sweating, panicked man standing in front of her. She looked at the itemized bill showing the declined corporate guarantees. In that single moment, the grand illusion completely shattered. Justine realized that the wealthy, successful executive she thought she was dating was actually a broke fraud. He was a mid-level marketing manager who was entirely dependent on his fiancé's bank accounts. He had brought her to Europe on stolen funds, and now he was begging her to bail him out of a criminal investigation. Justine did not shed a single tear. She did not offer a word of comfort. She pulled her hands away from his grasp, as if he were carrying a highly contagious disease. She looked at him with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. She quickly pulled out her own cell phone and opened an airline application. She stood right in front of him and booked a standard economy flight back to New York on her own dime. She told Bradley that she had just received an automated notification about a severe family emergency and needed to leave the country immediately. It was a flimsy, pathetic excuse, but she did not care. She turned on her heel, walked back up to the honeymoon suite, and packed her bags. When she came back down to the lobby, she walked right past him without a second glance. She left him entirely high and dry in a foreign country. Bradley was completely abandoned. His friends were gone. His mistress had fled. His mother had refused to answer his recent calls after I threw her out of my office. He was stranded, humiliated, and facing serious legal trouble abroad. The hotel manager confiscated his luxury watch and his custom designer sneakers as temporary collateral to prevent him from running away before the police arrived. Bradley was stripped of every single status symbol he desperately clung to. He was reduced to a desperate, broken man sitting in the corner of a hotel lobby. He managed to convince a sympathetic bellhop to let him borrow a cheap prepaid cellular phone for one single phone call. He knew he only had one option left. He had to call the woman he had betrayed. He had to beg for my forgiveness. I was sitting at my executive desk reviewing the final security protocols for the upcoming corporate gala when my private direct line began to ring. The caller identification displayed an unknown international number. I took a slow, deep breath, leaned back in my leather chair, and picked up the receiver. "Alexis," he sobbed into the phone. The audio was crackling and distorted, but the absolute terror in his voice was crystal clear. "Alexis, please do not hang up the phone. I am begging you." I did not say a word. I sat in the quiet comfort of my luxury office and listened to him cry. "I made a terrible mistake," he wept, his voice breaking pitifully. "This whole trip was a massive mistake. Chad and the guys abandoned me at the hotel. They left me here with nothing. Justine means absolutely nothing to me, Alexis, I swear to you. She was just a distraction because I was so stressed about the wedding. She left me here to deal with the police all by myself. You are the only one who truly loves me. You are the only one who has ever cared about me. Please, Alexis. I realize how much I need you. I will do whatever you want. I will go to counseling. I will be the perfect husband. Just please call the bank and turn the corporate code back on so I can come home to our apartment." He rambled for 3 full minutes. He offered empty promises and pathetic excuses. He tried to manipulate my emotions by invoking our past and claiming he had finally seen the light. He genuinely believed that if he cried hard enough and apologized enough, I would simply fold and rescue him like I always did. He thought my love for him was a weakness he could exploit. When he finally ran out of breath and stopped talking, the line went silent, except for the sound of his ragged sobbing. I let the silence stretch out for a long, uncomfortable moment. I wanted him to feel the heavy, crushing weight of his isolation. "Bradley," I finally said, my voice perfectly calm and entirely devoid of any sympathy. "You are not coming home to our apartment." "What do you mean?" he choked out. "I terminated the lease this morning," I informed him, speaking with sharp, articulate precision. "The property management company is currently changing the locks on the penthouse doors. Our luxury apartment was always solely in my name, and I am no longer interested in funding your living arrangements." "But my things," he panicked. "My clothes, my custom shoes, my electronics. Where is all my stuff, Alexis?" "Your personal belongings are currently sitting in a rented off-site storage unit in New Jersey," I told him. "I hired a junk removal service to pack up everything you own. I mailed the single access key directly to your mother, Beverly. You can ask her for it when you finally manage to scrape together enough pennies to fly back to America. But you will not be coming back to me." "Alexis, please, you cannot do this!" he screamed, his voice echoing through the foreign hotel lobby. "We are getting married in 3 weeks. We have a life together." "We had a life together," I corrected him. "But you decided you needed a break to find your youth. You wanted to escape your mundane domestic cage and live like a billionaire on my dime. I am simply giving you exactly what you asked for. You are completely free, Bradley. Enjoy your peace. I did not wait for his response. I placed the receiver gently back onto the base of the telephone and disconnected the call. I looked out the large glass windows of my corner office at the sprawling skyline of New York City. The sun was shining brightly, and the future had never looked so brilliantly clear. I had successfully excised a massive tumor from my life, and I was perfectly positioned to step into the greatest era of my professional career. The dead weight was officially gone. The office was completely silent after I ended the call. I sat at my executive desk and watched the city lights flicker across the Manhattan skyline. Bradley was officially stranded, and my emotional attachment to him was entirely severed. But my work for the evening was not quite finished. I needed to ensure that his removal from my life was legally ironclad. I opened a new document on my computer and began drafting a formal notice of eviction. I was not going to leave any room for negotiation or debate. I typed out the exact legal parameters of our living arrangement. I clearly stated that the Hudson River penthouse lease was signed exclusively by my corporate entity. He had never been a legal tenant. He was simply an authorized guest, and that authorization was now permanently revoked. I attached the digital receipt from the professional moving company. I included the exact address of the climate-controlled storage unit in New Jersey, where his custom sneakers and designer suits were currently sitting in cardboard boxes. I explicitly noted that the rental fee for the storage unit was only paid for 30 days. If he did not claim his belongings by the end of the month, the facility would auction off his entire wardrobe. I attached the legal documents separating our remaining personal assets. I formally closed the joint checking account that he had so arrogantly overdrawn. I absorbed the negative balance using my business funds strictly to close the account forever and sever our financial ties. I typed out his personal email address and hit send. The legal checkmate was officially delivered. With the financial and legal logistics handled, I turned my attention to the social fallout. I opened the master spreadsheet containing our wedding guest list. It was a massive document containing 200 names. The list included our extended families, mutual college friends, and high-profile corporate partners. For the past 6 months, these people had been receiving beautiful gold-embossed invitations and updates about our upcoming luxury celebration. Now it was time to provide them with the final update. I opened my email client and added all 200 email addresses to the blind carbon copy line. I did not want to send a sad, pathetic message canceling the event due to unforeseen circumstances. I wanted to send a message that would completely destroy his carefully constructed public narrative. I began to type the cancellation announcement. I kept my tone perfectly polite and exceptionally professional. The words were beautifully crafted, but entirely ruthless in their delivery. I wrote that it was with a heavy heart that I had to announce the formal cancellation of our upcoming wedding celebration. I explained that Bradley had recently discovered a sudden and urgent need to pursue other romantic paths in Europe. I wrote that he was currently exploring these new paths in Paris and Rome, alongside his 29-year-old junior co-worker Justine. I wished him the absolute best on his journey of self-discovery. I maintained a tone of graceful acceptance, making it clear that I was stepping aside to allow him to live his authentic truth. The polite delivery made the devastating reality of his infidelity impossible to ignore. A beautifully worded email was powerful, but undeniable visual evidence was absolute perfection. I opened my secure folder labeled Bradley Evidence. I selected 2 specific files to attach to the mass email. The first attachment was a clear screenshot of the first-class passenger manifest showing his name directly next to Justine. The second attachment was the detailed billing receipt for the Parisian honeymoon suite. The document clearly showed the 5-star romantic penthouse booked under his mistress's legal name and initially billed to my corporate travel agency. The evidence was irrefutable. Nobody could accuse me of acting crazy or fabricating an affair out of jealousy. The receipts told the entire story with brutal clarity. I attached the files, checked the recipient list one final time, and clicked send. The digital explosion was instantaneous. My phone began to vibrate violently against my desk, as the emails landed in 200 different inboxes across the country. The replies started pouring in immediately. Friends who had previously pitied me after seeing his arrogant social media posts were now sending messages of absolute shock and outrage. The group chats that Bradley shared with his remaining fraternity brothers erupted. The men who had previously thought his European escape was a hilarious joke were now mocking him mercilessly for getting caught in such a spectacular and humiliating fashion. He went from being a carefree rebel to a national laughingstock in the span of 5 minutes. His social standing within our entire network was completely and permanently eradicated. The exposure did not stop at our social circle. The guest list included several prominent executives and mutual contacts from his marketing firm. The polite but damning email circulated rapidly through his corporate office. Human Resources received wind of the scandal by the following morning. The revelation that a mid-level manager was having an affair with a subordinate employee while simultaneously engaging in corporate travel fraud was a massive violation of company policy. Bradley was placed on immediate unpaid administrative leave pending a full ethical investigation into his conduct. His carefully maintained professional reputation was entirely dismantled. He had no job, no fiancé, no apartment, and no friends left to defend him. Stranded in Italy with a massive unpaid hotel bill and a suspended career, Bradley was completely out of options. He had to make the one phone call he had been trying to avoid. He used his cheap, prepaid burner phone to call his mother, Beverly. The same woman who had ambushed me at lunch and praised her son for refusing to be caged was now forced to face the reality of his actions. Bradley wept into the phone, begging her to save him from the Italian authorities. Beverly realized that my threat was absolutely genuine. I was not going to turn the credit cards back on, and the hotel manager was fully prepared to have Bradley arrested for the theft of luxury services. Beverly had no choice but to rescue her golden child. She drove to her local bank in an absolute panic. She was forced to prematurely liquidate a massive portion of her own personal retirement savings just to secure the necessary funds. She paid the exorbitant $30,000 hotel invoice, absorbing the staggering cost of the vintage champagne, the couple's massages, and the damages his fraternity brothers had caused. Beverly drained her financial safety net to keep her 35-year-old son out of a foreign prison cell. The humiliation she felt while transferring the funds was entirely of her own making. After paying the hotel, Beverly had to arrange his transportation back to the United States. She was furious about the entire situation and severely limited on remaining cash. She did not book him a first-class ticket or a premium comfort seat. She purchased the absolute cheapest basic economy ticket she could find. Bradley was forced to fly home, squeezed into a middle seat near the back of the airplane with no luggage and no dignity. He was returning to America completely broken. And due to the limited availability of cheap international flights, his return journey was scheduled to land in New York on the exact weekend our wedding was originally supposed to take place. The poetic justice of his arrival date was absolutely perfect. I spent the next 2 weeks pouring all my energy into preparing the luxury estate for the tech industry product launch. The transition from a personal wedding to a high-octane corporate gala was seamless. I oversaw the installation of the neon blue architectural lighting and coordinated the arrival of the elite catering teams. My professional life was thriving while Bradley was sitting on a transatlantic flight drinking complimentary tap water and dreading his arrival. He had spent years coasting on my success, and now he was experiencing the harsh reality of providing for himself. As his flight descended toward John F. Kennedy International Airport, Bradley was likely planning his next manipulative move. He genuinely believed that the women in his life would eventually soften their stance and welcome him back. He thought he could simply drive to the wedding venue and deliver a tearful apology to win me back. He assumed I would be sitting at the historic estate crying over canceled floral arrangements and mourning the loss of our relationship. He had absolutely no idea that the venue was no longer a symbol of our failed romance. It had become the physical manifestation of my ultimate professional triumph. I was ready for his arrival, and the trap was perfectly set for his grand and devastating return. I knew exactly when his flight touched down on the tarmac at John F. Kennedy International Airport. My private security contractor had been tracking his flight status all morning. Bradley was stepping off a cramped basic economy flight after sitting in a middle seat near the lavatory for 8 grueling hours. He was wearing the same wrinkled clothes he had worn when he frantically fled the Roman hotel lobby. He had no designer luggage to retrieve from the baggage claim. He had no premium lounge upgrades waiting to offer him a hot shower. He had nothing but a cheap prepaid burner phone and the absolute delusion that he still held ultimate power over my emotions and my bank accounts. As he walked through the crowded terminal, he looked at the digital calendar on his phone screen. It was Saturday afternoon. It was the exact day our luxury wedding was scheduled to take place. Bradley possessed a highly predictable and intensely arrogant mind. I knew exactly how he would calculate his next move. He assumed that because it was our official wedding day, I would be wallowing in a state of deep emotional despair. He pictured me sitting in the grand ballroom of the historic Hudson Valley estate, surrounded by wilted white roses and uneaten tear cake. He genuinely believed that my ruthless emails and the formal eviction notice were simply the dramatic actions of a heartbroken woman lashing out in temporary pain. He thought I was throwing a massive tantrum and waiting for him to come back and fix it with his charming smile. His massive ego convinced him that this was the perfect opportunity for a cinematic redemption story. He planned to drive directly from the airport to the luxury estate. He wanted to burst through the doors looking exhausted and remorseful. He was going to drop to his knees in front of our remaining guests and deliver a tearful apology. He assumed that the moment I saw him, I would burst into tears, forget about his massive financial theft, and welcome him back with open arms. He wanted his luxury penthouse apartment back. He wanted his corporate travel perks back. He wanted his comfortable, effortless life fully restored, and he thought a few fake tears would easily pay the admission fee. He used the very last bit of cash his mother had provided to hire a private car service to take him up to the Hudson Valley. During the long drive north, he probably looked out the window and practiced his apology speech. He likely rehearsed the exact tone of voice he would use to blame his infidelity on pre-wedding anxiety and professional burnout. He was completely oblivious to the fact that he was driving straight into a highly secured, multi-million-dollar corporate production. While he was making his pathetic journey up the highway, I was standing in the center of the grand ballroom directing a total masterpiece. The historic estate had been completely transformed over the last 48 hours. The romantic wedding aesthetic he expected to see was entirely eradicated from the premises. There was no soft candlelight or delicate white drapery hanging from the ceiling. Instead, the massive room was illuminated by razor-sharp neon blue architectural lighting that perfectly matched the branding of my new technology client. The soft string quartet had been replaced by a state-of-the-art sound system and a high-energy electronic music producer mixing tracks on a raised platform. The venue looked like a futuristic nightclub reserved exclusively for the global corporate elite. 200 high-society tech executives, venture capitalists, and global media representatives filled the room. They were drinking premium cocktails and networking around sleek, modern display tables showcasing the new software. The energy in the room was absolutely electric, and the product launch was already a massive, undeniable success. I stood near the main stage holding a digital tablet and wearing a custom-tailored midnight blue designer suit. I looked sharp, powerful, and completely in control of my empire. I had a direct radio line to the private security team stationed at the front gates and the main entrance. I was simply waiting for the final piece of my master plan to arrive. The sun began to set, casting long, dramatic shadows across the manicured lawns of the estate. Bradley's hired car pulled up to the outer iron gates. He expected to see a quiet, deserted parking lot, or perhaps a few sympathetic family members packing up unused wedding favors in the dark. Instead, he saw a massive fleet of black luxury vehicles lined up along the circular driveway. He saw professional valet attendants in crisp uniforms rushing back and forth to greet arriving investors. He was entirely confused by the volume of luxury cars, but his sheer arrogance prevented him from understanding the reality of the situation. He simply assumed I had converted our wedding reception into a massive pity party for my wealthy clients and colleagues. He thought he was about to crash a sad gathering of people mourning our failed relationship. He stepped out of the vehicle and walked up the long stone pathway toward the main building. He looked completely out of place among the pristine surroundings. His clothes were rumpled from international travel, and his face was drawn and exhausted from the stress of his Roman eviction. He did not look like the wealthy, successful executive he had pretended to be in Europe. He looked exactly like what he truly was, which was a broke, desperate man, looking for a handout from a woman he had severely underestimated. He approached the grand, ornate wooden doors of the main conservatory. He took a deep breath and prepared his face to display the perfect amount of tragic, romantic remorse. He reached out and pushed the heavy wooden doors open, expecting the entire room to fall silent at the sight of his dramatic return. He expected the music to stop. He expected to see me standing in the center of the room wearing a white dress and wiping away tears of relief. Instead, the heavy doors swung open and hit him with a physical wall of pulsing electronic bass. Brilliant flashing blue lasers sliced through the dim room, illuminating a sea of wealthy strangers in high-end business attire. He stood frozen on the threshold, staring at a massive digital display screen broadcasting a corporate technology logo where our floral arch was supposed to be. There was no wedding. There was no crying bride waiting to forgive him. There was only a high-octane corporate gala filled with industry titans who had absolutely no idea who he was, and a highly trained security team watching his every single move. He blinked against the blinding strobe lights, his mind completely failing to process the visual information in front of him. He looked around wildly, searching for a familiar face among the sea of corporate executives, but he recognized no one. The waiters carrying trays of expensive champagne brushed right past him, without offering him a glass. The romantic fantasy he had meticulously constructed in his mind during the long flight home shattered into a million irreparable pieces. He realized in that agonizing moment that the world had not stopped spinning just because he decided to take a break. I had not paused my life to wait for his return. I had completely replaced him, and I had used the very event he thought would be my ultimate vulnerability to elevate myself to a level of success he could never hope to touch. The pulsing bass of the electronic music vibrated fiercely through the polished floorboards of the historic conservatory. Bradley stood completely frozen at the grand entrance, his jaw hanging slack as he stared at the overwhelming spectacle unfolding in front of him. The luxury venue he had selected months ago to showcase his manufactured wealth was now operating at a level of genuine corporate opulence he could not even begin to comprehend. The crystal chandeliers hanging from the vaulted ceilings had been outfitted with synchronized neon blue laser lights that cut sharply through the dim room. Waiters in crisp black uniforms moved seamlessly through the crowd, carrying silver trays loaded with top-tier vintage champagne and imported caviar. The technology executives moving around the sprawling room wore bespoke tailored suits and spoke in hushed, confident tones about global market shares and multi-million-dollar venture capital investments. This was absolutely not a wedding reception. This was an exclusive summit of actual industry titans, and Bradley was merely an uninvited peasant standing dirtily at the gates of a kingdom he no longer had access to. At the far end of this grand ballroom, a massive elevated stage had been meticulously erected by my production team. A giant digital display screen projected the sleek modern logo of Gavin Thorne and his global technology conglomerate. And standing right in the center of that stage, bathed in the brilliant blue architectural light, was me. I was not wearing a traditional white bridal gown. I had no delicate veil covering my face and no romantic floral arrangements woven into my hair. Instead, I was wearing a razor-sharp, meticulously tailored midnight blue designer suit. The cut of the fabric was immaculate, and it projected absolute, uncompromising corporate authority. I held a crystal champagne flute in one hand and a wireless microphone in the other. I looked out over the vast sea of wealthy investors and powerful industry leaders, feeling an incredible rushing surge of absolute professional triumph. I raised my glass to deliver the keynote toast for the evening. I spoke clearly and confidently about the profound power of strategic business pivots. I publicly thanked Gavin Thorne and his executive board of directors for trusting my travel and event agency with their highly anticipated global product launch. I declared to the room that our newly signed 5-year exclusive contract was a perfect testament to the fact that when you decisively remove dead weight and focus entirely on genuine, reliable partnerships, the potential for exponential growth is absolutely limitless. My words carried a double meaning that only I fully understood, but the delivery was flawless. The crowd of elite professionals erupted into thunderous, echoing applause. They raised their crystal glasses in the air to toast my agency and the massive success of the event. Bradley heard the deafening applause, and the sound finally snapped him out of his bewildered, terrified trance. His massive, fragile ego simply could not process the undeniable reality that he was entirely irrelevant to this magnificent celebration. He looked at me standing on the illuminated stage, radiating wealth, success, and total independence. Instead of turning around and walking away in shame, his narcissistic delusion completely hijacked his brain. He genuinely thought he could still control the narrative. He thought he could just barge right into the middle of my ultimate professional triumph and demand my undivided attention, exactly like he always did back at our apartment. He shoved his way past a highly respected venture capitalist, spilling the older man's expensive champagne directly onto the polished hardwood floor. Bradley began to sprint down the center aisle of the ballroom, pushing aggressively through the dense crowd of elite software developers and media representatives. "Alexis," he screamed at the top of his lungs, his voice cracking heavily with desperate, frantic panic. "Alexis, wait. I am here. I came back for you." He was waving his arms wildly, trying to draw my attention away from the tech executives. He looked absolutely deranged. His clothes were heavily wrinkled and stained from his grueling 8-hour basic economy flight. His hair was greasy and unkempt. He was sweating profusely, and his face was red with manic desperation. He was entirely convinced that if he could just reach the stage and grab the microphone, he could deliver a sweeping cinematic apology that would magically erase his massive financial theft and his disgusting infidelity. He did not make it within 50 feet of the stage. When I legally transferred the venue contract to my corporate agency, I had held a mandatory intensive briefing with the head of the private security detail. I had provided the security team with multiple high-resolution photographs of Bradley from every single possible angle. I had explicitly informed the chief security officer that a disgruntled, financially desperate former acquaintance might attempt to breach the perimeter and disrupt the highly classified corporate gala. The security team was operating on high alert. The very moment Bradley raised his voice and lunged aggressively forward through the crowd, 3 massive security operatives materialized seemingly out of thin air. They moved with terrifying, swift professional efficiency. 2 towering guards grabbed Bradley roughly by the arms, instantly locking his elbows tightly behind his back. The 3rd security officer stepped firmly right in front of him, creating an impenetrable physical wall, blocking his path to the stage. Bradley thrashed violently against their iron grip, his cheap, wrinkled travel clothes pulling dangerously at the seams. "Let me go!" he yelled loudly, spitting the words furiously at the stoic guards. "That is my fiancé up there on that stage. This is my wedding venue. You cannot touch me. I am supposed to be getting married today. Let me talk to her right now." The wealthy tech executives standing nearby took a collective step back to distance themselves from the commotion. They looked at the struggling, disheveled man with expressions of profound disgust and intense secondhand embarrassment. Several security personnel moved in to quietly reassure the investors that the intruder was being swiftly handled. On the stage, I did not flinch. I did not drop my polished professional smile for a single fraction of a second. I calmly handed my wireless microphone to the lead event coordinator standing near the podium and took a slow, deliberate sip of my vintage champagne. I walked down the short, carpeted flight of stairs, leading off the stage, and stepped gracefully onto the main ballroom floor. The crowd of wealthy investors naturally parted for me, creating a wide, clear runway directly toward the security perimeter. My designer heels clicked rhythmically and sharply against the hardwood floor, echoing with calm, absolute authority. Every eye in the room was fixed firmly on me. They were watching to see how the chief executive officer of this highly successful agency would handle a deranged, screaming intruder. Bradley stopped physically struggling the moment he saw me approaching. His eyes grew wide with desperate, frantic hope. He stopped yelling at the guards and stared at me pleadingly. He genuinely thought I was walking over to order the security detail to release him. He thought his grand dramatic gesture of flying home had actually worked. He looked at my sharp tailored suit and my perfectly styled hair, and he tried to offer me a weak, trembling smile. He opened his mouth to begin his rehearsed, pathetic apology. I stopped walking just inches outside his physical reach. I looked him up and down, taking in his unwashed hair, his panicked, sweating expression, and the absolute pathetic state of his completely ruined ego. He was no longer the arrogant man who had mocked my business at the airport terminal. He was a broken, terrified child begging for a handout. I tilted my head slightly, offered him a bright, stunning corporate smile, and prepared to deliver the final absolute blow. I looked down at the man kneeling against the security perimeter. The pulsing neon blue lights cast harsh shadows across his exhausted face. Bradley opened his mouth to speak, but I did not give him the opportunity to utter a single word. I raised my voice, ensuring that my words carried clearly over the low hum of the electronic music and reached the ears of every powerful tech executive standing nearby. "Thank you, Bradley," I said, my tone ringing with absolute professional clarity. "I want to sincerely thank you for taking a break from our relationship to find your youth in Europe. It was truly the greatest gift you could have ever given me." He stared up at me, his mouth opening and closing in silent, panicked confusion. He reached his hand forward as if attempting to grab the fabric of my designer suit, but the massive security guard immediately shoved his arm firmly back down. "You thought you were putting my life on pause?" I continued, making sure my voice sliced perfectly through the heavy air of the ballroom. "You assumed I would be sitting at home weeping over canceled floral arrangements and begging for your return. But stepping away gave me the exact space I needed to realize just how much dead weight I had been carrying for the last 5 years. You did not break my heart, Bradley. You simply removed a massive financial and emotional liability from my corporate balance sheet." The nearby venture capitalists and software developers heard every single word. A low murmur of approval rippled through the affluent crowd. They were accustomed to ruthless corporate acquisitions and hostile takeovers, and they recognized a perfectly executed power move when they saw one. Bradley realized in that horrifying moment that his cinematic apology was a complete disaster. The delusion that he held ultimate control over my emotions shattered entirely. He began to beg, crying actual genuine tears of desperation. "Alexis, please," he sobbed, his voice cracking pitifully. "I can explain everything. Justine meant absolutely nothing to me. The money was a terrible mistake. I will pay it all back. Just let me come home." I simply smiled and nodded to the chief security officer. I did not need to say another word. The 3 massive guards tightened their grip on his arms and physically lifted him completely off the floor. They dragged him backward down the long center aisle of the conservatory. His cheap travel shoes scuffed loudly against the polished hardwood. He kicked and thrashed, screaming my name over and over again, but the heavy wooden doors of the historic estate swung shut behind him, cutting off his voice entirely. The silence that followed his removal lasted only a brief second before the electronic music swelled back up to its full, vibrant volume. I turned around and walked gracefully back to the main stage. I picked up my wireless microphone and seamlessly transitioned right back into my corporate toast without missing a single beat. The executives in the room were absolutely captivated by my ruthless efficiency. Gavin Thorne, the chief executive officer of the tech conglomerate, raised his crystal glass to me from the front row with a look of profound, absolute respect. The product launch gala continued deep into the night, and it was a spectacular, unprecedented triumph. The event was featured heavily in major industry publications the following morning, catapulting my travel and event agency into a multi-million-dollar valuation. While my professional empire was rapidly expanding, Bradley was experiencing the absolute crushing reality of his consequences. My legal team moved with aggressive, merciless speed. Because he had fraudulently linked his international luxury vacation to my corporate travel software, my lawyers legally pursued him for commercial fraud and unauthorized extraction of corporate funds. He tried to claim the $40,000 wire transfer was a joint gift, But my legal team presented the threatening text messages he had sent me from Paris. The evidence of his malicious intent was completely irrefutable. To avoid devastating criminal prosecution and a lengthy prison sentence, he was forced to sign a highly restrictive binding financial settlement. The courts immediately garnished his wages to systematically repay the stolen $40,000, along with the immense legal fees I had accrued. However, paying those garnished wages became incredibly difficult for him because his corporate marketing firm officially terminated his employment. Human Resources concluded their ethical investigation and fired him for engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate employee while committing travel fraud. Stripped of his income, his luxury apartment, and his meticulously crafted social standing, he had absolutely nowhere left to turn. His former fraternity brothers actively avoided him. They wanted nothing to do with a man who had left them stranded with massive hotel bills in Rome. Justine had blocked his number the moment her economy flight landed in New York. He was a complete social pariah. His mother Beverly suffered an equally devastating fate. She had drained a massive portion of her own retirement savings to rescue him from the Italian authorities. Because she had liquidated those funds prematurely, she faced severe financial penalties and massive tax liabilities. The wealthy country club woman, who had proudly defended her son's right to sow his wild oats, was now forced to face the reality of his complete financial ruin. Her friends from the tennis club whispered behind her back, having seen the undeniable receipts of his infidelity and theft that I had emailed to our entire guest list. With no other options, Beverly had to let her 35-year-old unemployed son move back into his childhood bedroom. He was trapped in the exact suburban domesticity he had previously claimed to despise. He spent his days sleeping in a twin-sized bed, surrounded by his old high school baseball trophies, completely stripped of the unearned luxury he had paraded on social media. He was forced to work grueling entry-level retail jobs just to meet the court-ordered minimum payments on his massive garnished debt. The calendar flashed forward exactly 1 year later. I was no longer sitting in a dark parking garage looking at fraudulent bank notifications. I was standing on a sprawling private balcony overlooking the sparkling turquoise waters of the Amalfi Coast. The Italian sun was warm against my skin, and a gentle ocean breeze swept across the stunning terrace. I was not there on a corporate client visit, and I was certainly not there funding a miserable midlife crisis for an ungrateful man. I was on a month-long luxury vacation that I had fully funded entirely for myself. My travel agency had doubled its global revenue following the massive success of the tech gala. I had hired a talented team of junior executives to handle the daily operations, allowing me to finally enjoy the wealth I had spent my 20s building. I was living a life of absolute, authentic freedom. I walked over to the small marble table on the balcony and picked up a crystal glass of premium vintage wine. I looked out over the spectacular coastal cliffs and thought about the man who had abandoned me at the airport terminal 1 year ago. He had wanted to escape a cage so desperately. Instead, he had built his own inescapable prison, using his own staggering arrogance as the foundation. I raised my glass to the bright horizon, offering a silent, joyful toast to the incredible power of a clean, ruthless break. He genuinely thought he was walking away with my hard-earned future, but he had actually handed me the ultimate key. He had set me completely free. One of the greatest lessons from this story is that trust is far more valuable than money, status, or success. Relationships are built on honesty, loyalty, and mutual respect. And the moment those foundations are broken, no amount of apologies or excuses can truly repair the damage. Bradley believed he could take advantage of the person who loved him most, assuming that Alexis would always forgive him and continue supporting him. Instead, he discovered that every selfish decision eventually carries consequences. The story also reminds us that kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. Alexis spent years building a successful career while supporting the man she planned to marry. She worked hard, managed her finances responsibly, and created opportunities not only for herself, but also for the people around her. Because she was generous and dependable, Bradley assumed she would always clean up the messes he created. He confused patience with helplessness and loyalty with blind obedience. That was his greatest mistake. Another important lesson is the value of financial independence. Alexis was able to protect herself because she had built her own career, maintained clear records, and understood the importance of responsible financial management. When betrayal came, she did not rely on revenge fueled by anger alone. Instead, she relied on facts, documentation, and smart decisions. Her strength came from preparation, not from impulsive reactions. This reminds us that independence gives people the freedom to walk away from toxic situations without losing themselves. The story also teaches that actions always speak louder than words. Bradley repeatedly claimed he needed a break to rediscover himself, yet his actions revealed selfishness, deception, and betrayal. Meanwhile, Alexis rarely raised her voice or sought dramatic confrontations. She allowed the truth to expose itself. In the end, it was not her anger that defeated Bradley. It was the consequences of his own choices. Every lie, every stolen dollar, and every dishonest decision eventually returned to him. Perhaps the most meaningful lesson is that revenge is not always about destroying someone else. Sometimes the greatest victory is choosing yourself. Alexis did not waste her future trying to hold on to someone who no longer respected her. Instead, she redirected her energy toward rebuilding her life, protecting her business, and creating new opportunities. While Bradley lost everything because of greed and entitlement, Alexis gained something much more valuable: peace, confidence, and a future built on self-respect. Life often presents moments when people will underestimate our strength or mistake our generosity for permission to exploit us. During those moments, we must remember that setting boundaries is not cruel, it is necessary. Forgiveness may heal the heart, but accountability protects the future. Real love never requires sacrificing your dignity, your values, or your self-worth. When people show you who they truly are through their actions, believe them, protect yourself, and keep moving forward. In the end, integrity will always outlast deception, and character will always be worth more than convenience.